And welcome to the 2025 season preview for the Miami Marlins. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday morning. We just finished the Detroit Tigers just a moment ago. We've done quite a few teams across Major League Baseball. If your favorite team is already finished, please check out our channel. You can watch our season preview for your favorite team. We'll be finishing up the rest of the teams tonight, concluding with the Texas Rangers tonight at 7 o'clock. Be sure to join us for that one. Miami, of course, has had a rough go of it recently. Last year specifically, they were a team that was destined to sell at the deadline. They were hoping to be able to capitalize on a market desperate for some starting pitching, but only because of poor performance and injury, they were not able to capitalize on it. So enter 2025. That's the game plan once again, is to capitalize on the trade market at the trade deadline in 2025. Couple other things that we'll get into as far as payroll for the Miami Marlins, what they can do to keep out of the crosshairs of the MLBPA. We're also going to look at the future of the Miami Marlins and what type of players they're looking for in return for some of their trade assets. That and much more ahead here on the 2025 season preview for the Miami Marlins. Now looking at the where the standings were for last year for Miami, you'll notice that they weren't in the playoffs. They weren't even close. Ultimately, they finished second to last on the National League side of things with only 62 wins and 100 losses. Just was not a good season all the way around. They weren't able to capitalize on a poor season by at least getting some good options via trade. Ultimately, this offseason, they've already made one move, moving out of Jake Burger, getting a few prospects back in return. Love the deal for them, just because I don't think Burger was going to be a player that was going to be useful to them on their next contending ball club. I will give you a couple of news and notes here from the Marlins. First, in trade, they are looking for young players. So if you're looking at a Sandy Alcantara possibility for your favorite team, and you're thinking about what the Marlins would want in a trade from you, they want guys that are 20 years old of age or under. They do not want MLB-ready talent. They want to get all of that talent around that same age. That way they can come up as one big group, which is when we've seen the Marlins have their best success. 97, 03. Think of those ball clubs and how they built up those rosters to kind of compete for a 1 or 2 year window and then tore it apart. They're doing the same kind of thing right now where they realize they're not a great team. They've either had all offense or all pitching, but they've never had both since 2003. The best team that they had since then, unfortunately, was with Jose Fernandez and Marcell Ozuna, Giancarlo Stanton, Christian Yelich. That team had a little bit of both, but unfortunately, the untimely passing of Fernandez really cost them the pitching side of the equation, and they weren't able to keep things together. Finances with the Giancarlo Stanton contract really hamstrung this ball club, to where they had to ultimately offload him to the New York Yankees while still eating a significant portion of that salary. Now the Miami Marlins at least have a clear direction. I will say they've had a very murky past over the last 5, 6 years as well. They had Derek Jeter at one point, a part of the ownership group there. Ultimately, he said thanks, but no thanks after they failed to go after some of the top free agent targets to at least field a competitive team during those years. And I understand the thought process to why they didn't do it. They wanted to save money. Ultimately, they wanted to be a revenue sharing team. They weren't interested in being an okay baseball team that might win a wild card. They said either we're all in or we're all out. And as far as baseball is concerned, honestly, that's probably the way a team that's not going to be very good should view it. Not saying that's best for us as fans, not saying that's best for the industry as a whole, but the best for the Miami Marlins is to get a very good team very quickly or be very, very bad and not be stuck in the middle. We see these teams all the time be stuck in the middle. Right now, the St. Louis Cardinals are kind of mired in that. They've got to pick a direction here. The Reds, they're always on the periphery of winning the NL Central, but they can never seem to get over the hump. As far as on the American League side, pretty much every team in the AL Central at one time or another has been considered a favorite or at least a contender for the AL Central, but none of those teams were necessarily a World Series favorite or even a threat. The Miami Marlins, meanwhile, when they've had their greatest periods of success, have gotten to the highest round in the game in that World Series and had some success there. And for all the issues and problems we say the Miami Marlins have, the one issue that they do not have is that they don't have the indecision in that front office. They have a clear plan in place as far as how they want to use this roster, how they want to compete, how they view the future of this franchise. They certainly are not a wishy-washy bunch, and I got to give them a little bit of credit for that. But I will say, as far as a baseball fan, I still would like them to see, even in those down years, for them to at least have a better, more articulate plan and not be so reliant on only that one way of trying to compete or trying to get better for the future. For instance, last year they put all their eggs in the basket of, hey, we want to trade these guys at the deadline. Well, what happens when those guys don't pitch very well? Or they get injured? What happens then? Well, then it's a complete loss of a season. And so then you're left looking at the 2024 Miami Marlins saying, hey, what did we get out of a 100-loss season? Did we get any younger players that learned how to play the game at a higher level? Are we showing growth on the major league level? No, not really. Do we get any big trade assets out of such a bad year? Did we sell a couple of our best assets? No, not really. Did our best players get even better? Did they ascend? Did we look like a team that's on the rise? No, not really. Did we trade away veterans and at least save a lot of payroll? No, not really. And so what was the season for 2024 for the Miami Marlins? A complete loss from top to bottom. And that's a problem. Miami's going to have to figure that thing out going forward. They can't have another year be a loss just like it was last year, and it seems like that's the path they're headed down right now. So we'll dig into the roster here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and do that first. Miami, of course, has not spent a whole lot of money, but they do have some guys that you might be familiar with. Xavier Edwards, former top prospect. Connor Norby, love that one as well. Jesus Sanchez out there in right. Jonah Bride, Matt Mervis coming over from the Chicago Cubs. He's at least going to be in a platoon. Hopefully he can establish his value like it once was with the Chicago Cubs. Otto Lopez, Kyle Stowers, who came over from the Baltimore Orioles. So they do have some names that could be of use here. Dane Myers and their catcher, Nick Fortes as well. All very, very young. You'll notice the most experience out of any of these guys, Jesus Sanchez at 3 years of MLB service time. And then look at their ages. Every single one of them 29 years of age or younger. But also look at the other part of this roster, nobody in that 22, nobody in that 23 age range. So it's a lot of older prospects who have 1 year of service time or around 1 year of service time. This is not going to be a very good offense. I will say that. They're going to have to count on big years from Norby. Hopefully Stowers can get to that level. Mervis has a nice year for them. And, of course, Xavier Edwards. Outside of that, though, look at their WAR. Xavier Edwards, the only one over a 3. Then you get Otto Lopez at second base at 2. But offensively, look how many guys are below league average. 5 pieces in your lineup are below 100, which is league average weighted runs created plus. They are not going to have a very good offensive team. just doesn't do a lot. And then Norby at third base just doesn't have enough experience. They're not counting on much from him this year either. But overall, I would say this is a team that's chosen a direction. I will say they've been very clear about that. They're going with a clear youth movement here, especially on the offensive side of things, that they're going to have to figure out what they want to do financially, and we'll get to that payroll here in just a moment. Looking at their bench, Liam Hicks, former prospect of the Texas Rangers, Javier Senhoya, Eric Wagaman, Derek Hill. I like Derek Hill. I think he has a good offensive profile. Spent a little bit of time bouncing around the league last year. I think he played for like 4 teams last year, something along those lines. Texas, he got a few starts with. I think he played for the Mets at one point. He was all over the league. I can't remember all the teams off the top of my head anyway. But Derek Hill, a good offensive player last year. Hopefully he can bring a little bit of offense to this ball club in kind of a platoon role. But I don't want to interrupt the production that you'd be getting out of Stowers, Norby, etc. So whatever they have to do to get him in the lineup to help that offense, maybe a late game substitution for an offensive sub. Maybe you take over for Dane Myers, who was a Rule 5 pick. 29 years old. You don't expect a lot out of him. Maybe he plays a lot in center field. But again, nobody here above league average offensively on their bench either. Not a lot of production. Then this is where things get interesting. They have a very good pitching staff. Sandy Alcantara at the top looks like he could be ascending once again. Ryan Weathers, Eduard Cabrera as well, Max Meyer and Cal Quantrill. This does not even include Yuri Perez as well. Looking at their bullpen, they have some names that could be of use. Jesus Tinoco, who bounced around last year but played really well down the stretch for the Marlins last year. Anthony Bender, Calvin Foucher, Andrew Nardi, Declan Cronin, a couple of names that we've seen a couple of guys in our chat actually talk about being traded. Nardi and Cronin, I think those are 2 names to kind of keep an eye on as well. Lake Brasher, not sure how to pronounce the name, Anthony Veneziano, and Rony Henriquez, former prospect of the Rangers, found time with the Twins last year, and now finds himself in a long relief role for the Miami Marlins. I imagine he'll be in the starting rotation after the trade deadline to kind of soak up some of the innings left by the starters that they will deal, but they will deal a number of their starters this year. I'm expecting Sandy Alcantara to be one of the biggest names on the trade block at the trade deadline. Cabrera comes to mind as well. Cal Quantrill, they signed him to trade him. So just kind of, they have some flexibility with this roster as far as trades are concerned, especially on the pitching side. Injuries, Braxton Garrett, another starting pitcher, injured right now, UCL injury. This offseason, he'll probably be back late in the season, I would guess. Yuri Perez, Tommy John surgery beginning of last year. He'll probably be back around June, maybe July. And then maybe you get him another year of success at the big league level before you trade him. But he's only 21 years old right now, about to be 22. So you don't have to trade him this offseason. He could take over that role as ace of the staff once you trade Sandy Alcantara. Minor leaguers, just kind of run through this one pretty quickly here. Nobody at catcher that really stands out besides maybe Brantley, who could get some time. First base, nobody here either. Second, no. Third, no. Shortstop, Max Acosta. That was one of the pieces that they got in return for Jake Berger. I think he has a nice future for them. I think he actually gets some time at the big league level. They're only expecting a few plate appearances for him. He's going to be at Double-A to start the year, I'd imagine, and then Triple-A very quickly. He could be at the big league level by the All-Star break. I think there's a good chance of that. He's 22 years old, so he would be one of the younger players on their roster, even with the young offensive players that they do have. But that's kind of one player you hope for that at one time was a very good prospect for Texas, had a couple of tough years, had his prospect status reinstated last year after a solid season, and they flip in return for Jake Berger. So good return on that piece there. As far as their outfield mix, Griffin Conine, a nice piece for them as well, expecting to get half the season at the big league level. Albert Almora Jr. is going to get some run out there. You might remember him with the Chicago Cubs. Pitchers on the minor league side of things, Adam Mazur. Let's see here. Other names that might be of interest. Freddie Tarnok. I remember him. Tarno. Jansen Junk. I remember him. So they got a couple of guys. Connor Gillespie. They got a couple of guys that they can count on for depth options. If they decide to trade some of those guys at the deadline, they can easily fill in some guys at the top to at least eat some innings. This is not a season where they're trying to win games necessarily. They're trying to develop some talent on the offensive side of things, keep their pitchers healthy so that they can trade them at the deadline, and really reset this organization as a whole. Relief pitchers, Brett DeHues was just claimed off of waivers. by the Miami Marlins. There's a good chance he makes this roster out of spring training. Other names that might be of interest from years gone by: Josh Simpson. Nobody else that really jumps out to me that I recognize. But they do have a number of arms that they could turn to, just like any other ball club. But overall, this is a team that's going to be dominated by the trade headlines as to what they're going to do in that starting staff with Sandy Alcantara, what they're going to do in their bullpen with a couple of names that they could trade away, and then, of course, their young players when they do call them up, like Max Acosta and others. Their prospects, looking at this 2025 Top 100, they do have 3 of those guys. All 3 of them are 20 years old or under. I told you guys they're looking for talent in trades that is 20 years old or under to kind of match this group of talent that's coming. Looking at their 24 crop of prospects as well. Top 30 by team. Go to the Marlins. You can kind of see how a lot of these guys are kind of aging out at the major league level already. And the rest of it is all down at single A. All rookie ball. Rookie. More A-ball guys. And so that's why they're trying to get younger in the pieces that they get in trade. Looking at their payroll for this upcoming season, last year they finished with around 106 payroll with luxury tax taken into account there. You're probably looking at $120-ish million luxury tax payroll, which is why they didn't have a grievance filed against them by the MLBPA last year. This year they're expected to be around $70 million with only 2 guaranteed deals, Sandy Alcantara and and Cal Quantrill. A couple of arbitration guys, but again, nobody really making significant money. Just look at the savings on a Sandy Alcantara deal if you're trading him anyway. 17, and 21. That's a great deal, and he's 29 years old. That's going to be a very valuable commodity at the trade deadline. Avisail Garcia, of course, is not on the 40-man roster, no longer with the organization, but is still soaking up a lot of money here. And then you go to the payroll. Even with the arbitration factored in, they're only at $86 million. That's why this offseason we've been talking about them adding some salary, both via free agency and via trade. This is a team that's trying to get very young very quickly. So I think the best way for them to do it, I think the only way for them to do it most successfully in their situation, is to take on some bad contracts. And that's where we're going to go here in just a moment with what they could do with their offseason. Again, look at their future commitments. They have nothing committed for 28 and on. This is a team that's not going to spend a lot of money either. But they could also use to take on more money. Otherwise, they might not get their share of the revenue sharing because they didn't spend enough money. And they have to get around to that 113 threshold, around that $113 million threshold. That's a lot of money to add in payroll. In case you guys are wondering, that's almost $25 million, $30 million in salary that they're going to have to add. So kind of keep that number in mind as far as salaries that they'd have to acquire to avoid having a grievance filed against them. Now, the Marlins aren't looking to spend a lot of future commitment on this as well, so don't expect them to take multi-year deals back in return either. While they're trying to take on bad contracts to get good prospects in return, if that's the route they decide to go down, they don't want to tie up their future payroll. Like I said, they've got clean sheets. They like having those. They don't like spending money that they don't have to. And the reason why they're acquiring salaries in the first place is just to avoid having a grievance filed against them, 1, and to still get their revenue sharing money, 2. So let's keep that in mind as well. So let's go over to the trade board here. Wins of the offseason for me would be the return that they got for Jake Burger. Not much going on this offseason for them, and just getting clean, healthy spring training, making sure everybody's healthy as you get to the trade deadline is the most important thing for them. As far as offseason misses, those kinds of things, they didn't really do much. And so they don't really have any mistakes that they stepped in, but I would say that the miss for them is not trading for bad contracts already and getting good prospects in return, but let's see what they can do. They don't really have holes on this roster because their entire lineup is a hole to me. This rotation is going to have holes after they trade some of their top talent, but again, they're looking very, very young. Now, we did the trade for Sandy Alcantara already. I want to use a different piece to start this thing off. So let's go to the Marlins. Let's look at their trade value as far as who has some value going forward. We're going to go with their major league roster because they're not going to trade their young guys. Yuri Perez has a lot of value. Max Meyer has some decent value. Let's go with guys who have very little time left on their deal. Cal Quantrill is a piece that they'll trade. Again, you're going to get a decent piece. Not a difference-making piece, but a nice piece back in return. Sandy Alcantara has 3 years left on his deal. You're not going to get a whole lot back for Derek Hill at this point. Let's do Edward Cabrera. He's had his name tossed around quite a bit with the Yankees in years past, the Rangers in years past. A team that I think would be a great fit for him, that's talked already about a trade for Jesus Luzardo this offseason, would be the Chicago Cubs. So say you trade Cabrera here, gives them another solid starter in their rotation, like they were hoping Jesus Luzardo would be. You're only looking at about a $15 million valuation here. And remember, you're looking 20 years old or younger for your prospects here. So let's go ahead and flip it to the minors. We're not looking for major leaguers coming back. Balestros could be the first guy. I think that would be a one-for-one type trade. I think they'd want to go a little bit cheaper on the trade asset side of it. They could get a blue chipper like Jefferson Rojas. I think that would be the easiest insert into this trade, so we'll do that one first. Cubs don't have a lot of young talent coming either, so getting somebody with some control in that starting staff, I think, is the only reason why they would be giving up pieces that are a multitude of young pieces out of their minor league system here. They are all in on 2025, so I think they'll be a little bit more willing than in years past to make this type of a move. Melendez, 18-year-old shortstop there. Value we're up to 13.8. One more piece, and I think we got it done. Let's go with another 18-year-old shortstop, Ronnie Cruz. And again, they're looking for position players. They get 3 shortstops. I'm sure they'll utilize them at third and second as well. Don't worry too much about the position at that age because they'll utilize them wherever they can fit them into a lineup. But overall, if I'm the Cubs, would I do this trade? I think they need help in that rotation. This would be a cheap way to do it as opposed to going the route of a Dylan Cease or something along those lines. And he's signed for at least a couple more years. For the Miami Marlins, they get the talent that they're looking for at the age they're looking for, at the positions that they're looking for. Win, win, win for the Marlins. The Cubs would be the interesting one. If this is too much of a return for them, maybe they go a little bit cheaper with maybe moving Rojas out of this deal. But I think for the Marlins to make this deal, Rojas would have to be included. So maybe you take out Cruz and put in a different young player. That's a possibility. Let's validate it and post it. So there's our Chicago Cubs, add to their rotation, getting Edward Cabrera. So again, this year is about trading from that starting staff. Now we've traded one of those guys. Let's go back to the trade simulator. What else could they trade off of this roster from the Miami Marlins? This is a team that will sell at the deadline. We've done Sandy Alcantara. We'll wait for that one till last. We're going to the major side of things. Guys that are headed towards free agency. Cal Quantrill, we could do that one, but again, low cost. I want to do something a little bit more exciting here. We've done Sandy Alcantara. We're going to hold off on that one for now. Braxton Garrett is currently injured. Weathers you have out there as well. Let's go ahead and do Weathers. He's on the wrong side of the age curve for what the Marlins are looking for, and he's got 4 years of control. So that's something, teams that are looking for some solid starters could really utilize. Looking at his numbers for last year, I just want to see how he did. Last year, 2.5 WAR, 3.63 ERA. That's pretty solid, but only 16 games, 86 innings, 411 fielding independent pitching. Tells me he had a little bit of luck, or he had a little bit better defense behind him, so maybe some regression could be there. Strikeout numbers, not great. Walk numbers are very good, though, so you're not going to get a huge return. But the 4 years of good quality starting pitching, you could get a nice return out of it. So, Team 2, who could we put for Team 2? Looking for a younger 4-year starter here, or 2-year starter with 4 years left of control. Blue Jays come to mind. Braves come to mind. Let's see here, just scrolling down. Who else would make some sense? He kind of fits the path of what the Orioles have looked for in the past, but they need a number 1, not a number 3 or a 4. Somebody who could eat some innings. Rangers could be that team. I think the Reds are probably the best fit here. They have some good options for that starting staff, but they could always use more. We'll keep the Reds in mind. Detroit, they have some good young talent coming. We just did their video. But if they decide to sell at the deadline, maybe they do a little buying as well, getting a long-term guy in that rotation. Maybe. Doubtful, but maybe. Angels, this does kind of fit the mold of what they're looking for. A's, I think, would be a great fit. Let's go ahead and do the A's and just see what they would be looking for here. So with the A's, we're looking for around Weathers' money. I think he was around, what, 15-ish? 20? So what could you get? Again, we're looking very young. We're looking minors. Bolte could be the first one at around 7. Doesn't have a lot of talent here that really fits the age range of what they're looking for, though. Not a natural trade partner. Let's go to the other one. Let's go to the Reds. On the red side of the equation, this makes a little bit more sense. A lot of guys that fit this age range. Are you going to get a top 100 guy in exchange for Weathers? I think you get a borderline one. I think they're going to look to hold on to Collier. You might be able to convince them to get rid of Arroyo because they have Collier there at third base. But he is a little bit older. You could go with a kind of a grab bag down here, though. I think they would do this route instead to get more prospects out of it. So let's say they do Lewis for sure. Marino, 17-year-old shortstop, kind of fits. We're at 10. We could use 9 more. I was thinking Adolfo Sanchez, so I think I will do that one. Now you get 3 controllable position players, again fulfilling your needs. Age range is right, positions are right, and you're dealing from a position of strength in your starting staff. Yes, you're dealing away, what good pieces you have, but, this is the name of the game for the Marlins right now. Validate it, post it, and the Reds get themselves a solid starting pitcher for 4 years here. I think they could use some starting pitching anyway. I would kind of like this move for them. Marlins, I already love the deal. But I'm just wondering if they would choose to do something different with those resources if I'm the Reds. That'd be my only hesitation on it. Overall, though, I like the deal. Let's do one more trade before we do the Sandy Alcantara one. Let's say they take on some bad money like we've been talking about here. They could even do it within the division. Let's go to the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies are restricted quite a bit right now because of that the finances that they have. We're looking for negative assets. They're not going to take Trey Turner. Taijuan Walker and Nick Castellanos are about as long of a term deal that they might take on for the bad money. And remember, Castellanos was the player that Derek Jeter wanted them to bring in. How funny would it be for them to finally bring him in on that contract they were hoping to sign, or that Jeter was hoping they would sign him to, and ultimately choose to bring him in later on. Now, negative 67 value. That's a significant cost. Remember, the Marlins are looking for younger players. They're not looking for MLB-ready talent. So what could they give up that would fit? Andrew Painter just fits outside of that. I don't think they would give him up. I think you'd have to include Aiden Miller as the centerpiece of this deal. Let's see who else they have. You'd have to include Edward Tate as the number 2. Crawford would probably have to go in this deal. You're close. Maybe you could hold out Crawford, but you'd have to include Chase. Maybe they go that route anyway. Let's go ahead and take out Crawford and put Chase in this, even though I think they would prefer the position. But if they already get those other deals done and they help with their position side of things, maybe getting one pitcher here like this would be a nice piece for them. And then you still have about 6 left that you can add. Maybe Burkhalter. And then for the Marlins, maybe you give up a relief pitcher. A guy who doesn't have a whole lot of value. Cronin could be that guy. Maybe you give him Lake Botcher just to make it a deal. Would I do this deal if I'm Philadelphia? Probably not. I'd rather eat the money for 2 years than give up that many prospects. If I'm Miami, I'd probably do the deal. Let's do one more, though, with Miami. Just acquiring some bad salaries. Yankees are another team that's been looking to offload some salaries the entirety of the offseason. Going to the Marlins here. Now, again, the thought process here is taking on the bad money of a Stroman, the bad money of a DJ LeMahieu. Stroman still has some positive value, though. He can still be a solid pitcher that they could then turn around and flip at the deadline. And the best part is he's a free agent at the end of the year unless he reaches a certain vesting option. But I think they could pay down his deal this year, trade him, and if another team does let him reach that vesting option, then he's their responsibility. DJ LeMahieu, I think you'd have to approve this trade, but I think if you convince him that he could get everyday playing time there in Miami, that he would do it. I don't think he wants to be a clubhouse cancer, but at the same time, I think he wants to be on a competitive ball club. But I think the playing time might be enough of an argument for them to be able to get it done. John, welcome in. What's up, bro? Do you think the Orioles are done? I sure hope not. No, I don't think they're done. I do think they'll add a starting pitcher at some point during the season. But as far as talent acquisition before the season, or trading away some guys at the end of spring training, I think there's a good chance that they could move a guy like Ryan O'Hearn if some of those outfielders work well in spring training. They want to go with some of those guys out of spring and just see what they have. But of course, injuries happen. They don't need to move on from a Ryan O'Hearn. But I think at the deadline, it could become a possibility for them to move on from a piece like that. But I think the bigger thing for the Orioles for you, John, would be them adding a starting pitcher. And that's where we're about to go here in just a moment. But again, let's say we do LeMahieu and Stroman. You're going to have to include positive assets for round 34. Again, you're looking young guys. Lombard would fit that. But I think they would have to include Arias would be the headliner. Selvage, I just don't think they have enough to do both. Let's take out DJ LeMahieu from this deal. And then say you just do Arias there. Would you do that trade two for essentially space? You send them cash considerations. Let's go ahead and throw the Marlins. Say they give up a relief pitcher, 23-year-old reliever. There's your trade. Marlins solve the issue that they have with the MLBPA by acquiring some salary here. Meanwhile, the Yankees solve an issue that they have as far as salaries. The issue then becomes, do they add another starting pitcher because they're going to have Luis Gil on the injured list? That would be the worry there by moving on from Stroman, who's projected to be one of your 5 because of the injury to Luis Gil. Now you're going to have to go out there and add a starting pitcher. There are guys out there that fit that description. Guys like Lance Lynn, guys like Kyle Gibson, Jose Quintana, among others that they could turn to. They do have experience with Lance Lynn already. Maybe they go back down that pathway. I think that would probably be the best way to do it if they were trying to offload Stroman's money. All right, let's get to a fun trade, though. Let's do Sandy Alcantara, the one you guys have been waiting for. What could they get in return for Sandy Alcantara? We've already done Alcantara to the Orioles. Just kind of show you the reasoning why this trade would be very difficult as a 2-team deal. Looking at their players and their ages. Let's go do it by surplus, actually. How many of these guys do you think they would be able to trade for Sandy Alcantara? Basayo has a little bit more money. Basayo, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. 20-year-old Jackson Holliday, you giving him up? I would say no. Then you have to go all the way down. Keep going. All the way down until you get to Honeycutt, until you get to Michael Foret, before you get to value here that they would be interested in. That's not enough, especially when you're going to have to give up $48 million as far as value here for the Orioles. That's why they would have to go to a 3-team trade. The Los Angeles Dodgers would be a great trade partner there. But if they're interested in acquiring some starting pitching at the deadline anyway, why would they help out the Orioles acquire the starting pitcher when they're the team giving up the prospects the Marlins are looking for? So let's go over to the Los Angeles Dodgers, a team already that's built to win a World Series. Maybe they just want to make sure nobody else gets Sandy Alcantara. Maybe that could be the reason why they could do it. But let's say this is the trade. They send him to the Dodgers. Dodgers go to the minors. This is where I would want probably Hope to be the centerpiece of this deal. I think he's going to be a really nice piece for the future. Then you get into these guys, Emil Morales and Vargas. I think both of those guys have bright futures. I would want both of them in this deal. And our value, we're up to 42. We need about another 6 to get it done. You could go with Kellen Lindsay. That would make some sense. I think we'll even do that one. Or a comp pick. I think that was already traded, though. I don't think you could do that one again. I'm going to go ahead and leave Lindsay in this one. So there's your trade. 4 for 1. Let's validate it. Post it. And there you go. Dodgers get Sandy Alcantara. Meanwhile, the Marlins have now traded Weathers. They've traded Alcantara. They've traded Cabrera and gotten multitude of prospects back and taken on some more salary so that they satisfy the MLBPA's requirements there. They could even take on the money of Chris Taylor and get an even bigger return if they wanted to from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Just a number of ways that the Marlins could use their roster to kind of either A, take on bad salaries to get the prospects that they're looking for, or B, for the Dodgers to ultimately try to acquire a Sandy Alcantara. They could go a number of different ways with prospects to be able to get it done. And the Dodgers aren't the only team that's going to be in there for Alcantara. A number of teams will be. I'm sure the Mets will have some conversations. I'm sure the Rangers will kick the tires on it. I'm sure the Cubs would love to have a player like this. I don't think they have the pieces, though, to get that one done. But teams that are looking to compete and win a World Series, the Orioles, I'm sure, would love to get this deal done. I just don't think they have the pieces that the Marlins are looking for to get the deal done. Willard, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Brendan Rodgers signing with the Astros, a major steal of the offseason, plus a few former All-Star, Gold Glove second baseman, and if you want, at Walker at first baseman, second baseman Brendan Rodgers, a former Gold Glove, Pena, former Gold Glove, and then you have Paredes, best infield in baseball. No. I would say Rodgers does elevate the future for them a little bit, but he didn't work out with the Colorado Rockies, and there's a reason they decided not to tender him a deal there in Colorado. Yes, I love that they chose to bring him in. I do think the Rockies made a bit of a mistake because I thought he should have been given time to develop there in Colorado. Guess what he's not going to be given in Houston? Time. And that's what he really needs. Time at the major league level to really develop and be that second baseman that he was expected to be, or shortstop. He originally came up as a shortstop in the draft and ended up getting moved over to second. Now, I still think he's got a nice future ahead of him. I hope that he has all the success there in Houston. I do still think it's a solid addition. I love Walker over there at first base. For me, probably the best defender at first base. Pena out there as shortstop is a very good defender there. Paredes is a good one over at third. They are going to have a better defensive second base if Altuve is moved out to the outfield because that was their one weak link. But as far as best infield in all of baseball, I would say that there's probably a team or two that could hold a candle to you. Dodgers, I think, come to mind. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, wherever they decide to play him. Kim, wherever they decide to play him. Edman. They have all kinds of options that they can flex all over that diamond. Max Muncy come to mind. I think they're in the argument for best infield in all of baseball. The Atlanta Braves, to me, probably have the best infield in all of baseball. Shortstop is their one issue, offensively, but I think if they put Jerks and Profar there, I think that solves the issue offensively. But they have Olsen, Albies, Riley, and then Arcia currently, but of course they could have Profar or the offseason trade rumblings around Bo Bichette. Maybe they go that direction in the offseason. But for right now, I'd say the Braves are probably just a step ahead there as well. Mets have a good one. I think defensively, Pete Alonso leaves a little bit to be desired, but offensively, certainly a good player over there. Then you have second base with McNeil. You have shortstop with Lindor. Third base with whoever they decide to put over there, Vientos, Beatty, Mauricio, Williams, Acuna. I think that's a good infield as well. Better than the Astros, I'm not sure, but I would say they have a good one. The Orioles have a really good infield as well. Mountcastle over there at first base. Westberg is in the infield. They're going to have Henderson in the infield. Holiday's going to be there as well. They have a good mix there as well. John, would you do Mountcastle, Kierstead, and maybe Mayo for Luis Castillo? For Luis Castillo, I think that'd be too rich. Luis Castillo's value, in case you're wondering, is around $8 million in value according to Baseball Trade Value. Mountcastle is about that same value already. It's because of the money that's on Castillo's deal as to why that would happen. Mayo has way too much value. They aren't even willing to trade Dylan Cease for Mayo there. So you're not getting that deal. As far as if you're interested in Luis Castillo, Mountcastle would have to be the piece that goes to help offensively. But the reason why the Mariners wouldn't do it is because they're really settling for losing the best rotation in their history in order to get a little bit better at first base offensively. Not to say that Mountcastle wouldn't be a big improvement for them, but the loss of Castillo would certainly outweigh the addition of a Mountcastle. Hurstead would be a nice piece, but you're going to have to include other pieces from the Seattle side of the equation or money to make this thing work, and I don't think they would do that. So Luis Castillo to the Orioles might be a better fit for the Mountcastle piece, but Mayo Hurstead might be a little bit too rich. All right. As far as the 2025 season, what does it hold for the Miami Marlins? Last year they finished with 62 wins. I think they finish beneath that this year. I think they finish with something in the neighborhood of like 55 wins, especially if they sell off some pieces from this lineup overall. Let's see here. As far as the roster, like I said, I'm expecting a lot of trades of their own pieces. I'm expecting them to take on some bad contracts, and that's what this season is going to be primarily about for them. They're not going to be acquiring any big pieces, major league talent or anything like that. It's going to be about selling this off season or this entirety of the season as well. Off-season grade, I like the deal that they made for Berger, but I'm going to give them a C minus. Just because I think they should have taken on more money, acquired more talent via trade, via prospects, taking on bad contracts. That's what they should have been doing last year as well, and they chose not to do so. That's why I'm grading them a little bit more harshly, because again, they failed to accomplish their task. Last year, they set the goal of trading away some of their starting pitchers. Ultimately, they did not. The trade for Jesus Luzardo, I don't like the piece they got back in return. And ultimately, I think it was a nothing trade for both sides. I think the Marlins could have done better, and I think the Phillies could have done better in their search for some starting pitching. Now I think is the time for them to really maximize on the talent that they get back for their starting pitchers that they have left. Alcantara, Weathers, Quantrill, among others. Cabrera as well. Growth and surprises. Of course, they're hoping for this lineup to have some growth out of it. Some of their younger players like Stowers and Norby to really have nice years. Mervis to really solidify himself at the big league level is what you're really hoping for. And then those young pitchers that you bring up from the minors to take those spots of those veterans in that rotation for Yuri Perez to get back to on that Sandy Alcantara ace level track is another one to keep in mind as well. Willard, upside, you think former Astros Ken Caminiti had best defensive third baseman arm behind Brooks Robinson, Mike Schmidt, or do you think what Jason from Avenue Podcast said, former third baseman from Yankees in late 90s was a little bit better when it came to Ken Caminiti at third base? I'm talking about former Yankees third baseman Scott Boras. You mean Scott Brocious? I remember Scott Brocious from those 90s Yankees teams. Underrated player even by today's standards. A lot of people have forgotten about his abilities, but I would say some of the best third basemen, third base is a relatively underrepresented position in the Hall of Fame. Beltre going in helps that a little bit. His defense, one of the better defensive third basemen, but I'd say, third base with Robinson and Schmidt, probably the best two there. Ken Caminiti, if he didn't have the issues towards the end of his career with the PED suspicions, etc., probably would have had a better case to be in consideration for some of these awards, but I don't think even in his time he was viewed as a future Hall of Famer. I thought he was viewed as a very good player even at that time, but I do like Ken Caminiti, the player overall, what he did at the time, but he wasn't a Hall of Famer to me. But Scott Brocious, again, not a Hall of Famer, a Hall of good players. I wouldn't say very good, but a good player. Aaron Boone in that class of very good players. But not Hall of Fame worthy. But again, third base is severely underrepresented. Chipper Jones, one of the best third basemen that ultimately got pushed off of the position as he got older because they wanted to go with other younger players who needed to play that position. Austin Riley, among a few other players over the years, but one of the better third basemen in baseball history. People always leave him out when they talk about third base, when you include Brooks Robinson and Mike Schmidt. Don't forget about Chipper Jones, and don't forget about Adrian Beltre, two of the best to do it in our recent history. But there are some good third basemen that have moved off of shortstop in recent years to move over to third base. Machado comes to mind. Nolan Arenado was a very good third baseman for about 10 years. Has certainly fallen off over the last couple, but certainly was one of the best at that time. Chris Bryant got off to a great start in his career and really fell off towards the end of his time with the Chicago Cubs and fell off the cliff when he got to Colorado. But again, third base, we'll see what they do with the Hall of Fame as far as representation of third base in the future see which players get a little bit more run because they are third basemen. Alrighty. Again, we've talked a little bit about growth and surprises out of this team. Ceiling for this ball club, say they get some really nice surprises out of some of their roster. Say they get some really nice improvements out of Stowers and Norby, etc. Do they even finish above the Washington Nationals? No. Looking at where they finished last year and the pieces they're going to be moving off of this roster, I think best case scenario is maybe a 65-win ball club. I think it's going to be uphill sledding just to get back to where they were last year. I do not think this is a good ball club. So, with that being said, what's the floor for this ball club? Last year, you'll remember the White Sox finished famously with 41 wins. If they sell early, like well before the deadline, say they trade Sandy Alcantara in May, say that the younger pieces don't produce, Max Acosta doesn't gets his feet wet at the major league level and really struggles, and they just live with it. Do I think they get down to 41 wins? As currently constructed, I'd say probably yeah. There's a good chance that they could get into that 44, 43 win category as kind of a low totem or a low mark of the season or low mark of their franchise history. Is there a chance that those players play a little bit better? Absolutely. But as currently constructed, without them adding some solid veterans to at least keep this thing from going completely off the rails, I think this is a team that has a real volatile chance of getting to that 41 win threshold. But I'll say for now, they finish in that 50-ish win threshold. Best case scenario for them is they get to, say, 65, but I doubt it. More realistically, I think they finish in the mid-50s or in the high 40s with a win total there. All right, this has been your 2025 season preview for the Miami Marlins. Again, this is all about selling at the deadline, the pieces in that rotation. Just names to kind of pop up once again. It's all about Alcantara, Weathers, Cabrera, and Quantrill. Those are pieces that will be moved at the deadline for sure. And then maybe a couple pieces out of the bullpen. Cronin, Nardi come to mind among others. Appreciate you guys joining us. We'll take a little bit of a break here, let my voice rest before we do our next live. The next video we will be doing, I believe, is the San Diego Padres. We'll start that one at about 11-ish. We'll take about a 15-minute breather here, get a drink, stretch our legs. So we'll be back here in just a little bit. But appreciate you guys sticking with us as we conclude the 2025 season preview videos for each of the MLB teams. If your favorite team is the Chicago Cubs, New York Mets, Los Angeles Dodgers, we've got you. Check out those videos. We already have those up on our YouTube channel. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook at Upside Sports Network and on X at Upside SN. Appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll be back here in about 10-15 minutes with the 2025 season preview for the San Diego Padres. Appreciate you.